India's top prospect, Jubli, faces a significant test against Quillan Salkilld, and here's how I see it going. Salkild's pressure and cardio will likely be a major factor against Jubli. We saw Jubli falter in the third round against Bruna in a fight he was winning 2-0. He only needed to survive 2 more minutes to secure a clear decision, but instead, he fatigued quickly, became flat-footed, and seemed to mentally shut down once his gas tank hit empty. Now, he faces Salkilld, who is far more active and relentless than Bruna, who mainly stalked Jubli and absorbed his best shots. Salkilld won't be a punching bag and will bring constant pressure from the start. Jubli still carries power and has decent grappling, but I feel Salkild's pace will eventually wear him down. Jubli will likely struggle to keep up, and I can see Salkilld securing a choke or delivering a brutal ground and pound finish in rounds 2 or 3. If Jubli somehow survives, he probably won't have done enough to win on points. His best chance to win is early on, where he'll need to establish respect, control the range, and manage the pace to conserve his energy. However, I don't think Salkilld will allow him to dictate the fight and will impose his own pace, forcing Jubli to react rather than dictate. Final prediction: Quillan Salkilld by submission or TKO. Though a decision prop isn't out of the question, I'm leaning towards a finish. Kevin Jousset will be looking to bounce back from a one-sided loss to Brian Battle in his opponent's backyard. While Jousset had some moments, it was clear that the fight was largely one-sided. A loss like that can have a mental effect, and now he faces another pressure fighter in Jonathan Micallef, who is known for putting his opponents on the back foot, whether striking or pushing to grapple. Jousset's weakness seems to be against pressure fighters who maintain sustained pressure for at least 2 rounds. When forced out of a technical pace, he tends to wilt, and this is where Micallef can capitalize. Micallef brings relentless pressure from the start and has excellent cardio to push the pace through all 3 rounds. On the feet, Jousset is the more well-rounded striker, so Micallef is unlikely to stand with him for long. However, Jousset's grappling remains a significant vulnerability. While he has basic defense, he is limited in this area and often struggles when forced into unfavorable positions or up against the cage. Micallef can exploit this weakness, keeping Jousset in a grueling grappling battle throughout the fight, using strikes to maintain the pace should Jousset break free. Jousset may have some answers early on, but after the first 5 minutes, I expect him to start slowing down, allowing Micallef's pressure and grappling to take over. Once Jousset tires, Micallef could either get him to the ground or take his back, and from there, a submission is possible. I believe Micallef will sap Jousset's energy in the early rounds by forcing him to grapple and carry his weight. Jousset came in slightly bigger this time, perhaps to address the size difference he felt in his last fight, but Micallef is naturally bigger for the weight class and has proven his ability to maintain a high pace in 5-round affairs. While Jousset has experience in long fights, he showed extreme fatigue in his previous bouts, winning only just enough to edge out opponents who didn't capitalize on his weaknesses. I don't expect Micallef to make the same mistake and believe he will take full advantage. My final pick is Jonathan Micallef to win by decision or submission. While a TKO prop is possible if Micallef really pours it on in the later rounds, I think the submission or decision is more likely, as he'll likely avoid prolonged striking exchanges. These two might as well be brothers. They look alike in both face and body type, with Kody being the bigger one, and share similar fighting styles. Both are tough, pressure-heavy fighters who rely on their powerful frames to break opponents. However, Kody Steele is the more well-rounded of the two, especially in grappling, where he's far superior to Rongzhu and more willing to take the fight to the ground. Rongzhu is a tough challenge for Steele, and I suspect the UFC booked this fight for that exact reason. However, he has more defensive flaws. As we saw in his last fight, he's not particularly responsible on defense. In general, fighters from his region tend to rely on toughness and aggression rather than technical defense, similar to many South American fighters. That said, Steele's more complete game makes him harder to hurt, as opponents must also respect his grappling. Rongzhu, on the other hand, is almost entirely reliant on his hands and lacks variation in his approach. He's also very hittable inside the pocket, which Chris Padilla exposed, landing brutal elbows that ultimately finished him. Steele does excellent work in the pocket, mixing up his attacks with elbows and body shots rather than just headhunting. He's also active in the clinch, landing strikes and breaking at smart moments. Rongzhu, who fights at full throttle, will likely absorb a lot of these shots in an attempt to land his own. Both men have knockout power, but I'm leaning towards Steele to land the fight-ending strikes. I'd also consider a submission prop for Steele. Rongzhu makes basic mistakes on the ground, and I can see Kody capitalizing with a choke or another opportunistic finish. That said, Rongzhu is tough and may survive, so my main pick is Kody Steele by decision. Is Aleksandre Topuria a legitimate threat to the division and the throne, or is he overrated and not on Ilya's level? This fight should answer those questions as he faces an equally aggressive wrestler striker in Colby Thicknesse. Colby has a slicker approach to securing takedowns, mixes his strikes well, and could pose problems for Aleksandre. That said, I see Aleksandre winning, possibly by finish. Colby fights at a relentless pace, but Aleksandre lost his debut by making a similar mistake and will capitalize on Colby's aggression with effective counters. A round 2 TKO or a dominant decision seems likely. Colby's unorthodox striking could also leave him vulnerable to a submission, so keep an eye on Aleksandre's sub-prop. Final prediction: Aleksandre Topuria TKO/submission/decision. This fight will be an intriguing clash of kickboxing styles, as both fighters excel in that area. Expect competitive exchanges in the pocket, but my pick is Cong Wang. Wang's effective aggression presents a tough matchup for Bruna, who prefers counterstriking off the back foot. Additionally, Bruna is moving up from strawweight, so her power at this weight remains a question mark. While she is sharp, she relies heavily on power and doesn't throw much from the front foot. I see Wang pressing forward and controlling the range, but likely with more caution after her recent loss. She was countered and dropped by Fernandez for being too aggressive inside. If Bruna carries her power up in weight, Wang will need to balance her pressure carefully. Bruna could mix in wrestling, as Wang has shown some vulnerabilities there, but Wang has improved and may have the size and strength advantage to neutralize it. In fact, we might even see Wang land a takedown of her own, as Bruna's takedown defense is still exploitable. I also expect Wang to target the body, an area where she does solid work. Bruna has had cardio issues before, and if Wang forces a high pace, she could fade. However, Wang's own gas tank will be tested as well. Final prediction: Cong Wang by decision or TKO. Nolan vs Viacheslav Borshchev is a technical scrap that should deliver action, as both fighters prefer to engage in the pocket. While both carry respectable power, I expect Borshchev to land the more significant shots. Nolan often keeps his chin high and relies on an open guard, making him vulnerable to hooks and uppercuts. As the taller fighter, he aggressively crashes into range, using pressure as his main form of defense to keep opponents on the back foot. However, Borshchev has the tools to counter this style. I see him timing Nolan with an uppercut or hook, leading to a knockout. Ultimately, Nolan's defense is the weaker of the two. While he is slowed down slightly, his relentless style remains unchanged. My final pick: Viacheslav Borshchev by TKO inside the distance. This might be the best technical scrap on the card, with Jenkins taking on Gabriel Santos in his backyard. Jenkins, an all-gas no-brakes fighter, will bring relentless pressure, but Santos matches that intensity. I expect them to meet in the middle, trading inside, where one could get put out. However, I also anticipate moments of hesitation, both stalking within striking range, looking for openings. Ultimately, I'm leaning towards Santos. He carries more power, and Jenkins's aggression often leaves him open defensively. I do see Jenkins respecting Santos's power enough to fight smarter, possibly utilizing leg kicks early. But Santos' own leg kicks are just as effective, which could force Jenkins to abandon that approach and ramp up his aggression. If that happens, Santos will stand his ground and likely catch him in the pocket. If hurt, Jenkins may resort to wrestling, where he could find success. However, Santos has dangerous jiu-jitsu and will actively hunt submissions off his back. While Jenkins could rack up control time, I see him eventually having to disengage, or getting caught in a submission. Final prediction: Gabriel Santos by submission or TKO. However, Jenkins is tough in game, so a decision win for Santos wouldn't shock me. Also, be wary of a possible robbery if it goes to the scorecards. Jenkins already got one over Emmers, and that wasn't even in his hometown. If it's close, expect the judges to lean his way. These two fighters have very similar styles, particularly in their striking, as both rely heavily on boxing. Early in his UFC career, Jake Matthews utilized his black belt in jiu-jitsu more often. But over time, he realized he couldn't submit everyone, especially against strong wrestlers who could neutralize his grappling, as seen in his fight with Sean Brady. Since then, he has leaned more into his boxing, evolving into a well-rounded MMA fighter. Francisco Prado shares many of Matthews' attributes. While not a black belt, he has some grappling experience but, like Jake, prefers to keep the fight standing. With that in mind, this fight is likely to be a back-and-forth boxing match, something this weak card desperately needs. As for my prediction, I'm taking Jake Matthews. I see him as the bigger, stronger, and more polished version of Prado, who is making his welterweight debut. While Prado has fought at 170 pounds outside the UFC, he hasn't faced high-level competition at this weight, which could be a major factor here. I expect Matthews to use outside leg kicks to slow Prado down, mix in some grappling to disrupt his rhythm, and stand his ground in the exchanges. I also see him pushing Prado back rather than letting him dictate the pace. With that, my final prediction is Jake Matthews via decision. You might be asking yourself the same thing I did when this fight was announced: why is this the main event? Sure, it could be exciting and likely end in a finish, but why would anyone pay to watch a semi-retired Crute take on an unproven Bellato on a PPV? Dana White actually expects people to shell out money for this, and it's absurd. Now, onto the fight itself. I'm picking Bellato to win and finish Crute, who seems uncertain about his future in MMA. Bellato, on the other hand, is steadily building his name and fights like someone with something to prove. Meanwhile, Crute is coming off back-to-back losses, getting finished in all but one of them. That said, Crute recently gave an interview addressing these concerns, making some valid points. He revealed he had been plagued by injuries for the past 4 to 5 years, coinciding with most of his losses, along with struggles with depression and fear in fights. He claims to have overcome these issues, so we might see a sharper, more dangerous version of him this time. Still, I'm sticking with Bellato. Even under pressure, he's willing to bite down, mix things up, and survive. Crute fits that mold too, but after nearly 2 years out of action, ring rust is a real factor. His timing, cardio, and durability could all be compromised. Bellato should capitalize on this, even if Crute has improved. One advantage Crute does have is his wrestling, and we'll likely see him lean on it. However, if Bellato forces him to work hard for takedowns, Crute's cardio may not hold up. Both men carry respectable power, but if Crute's chin is compromised, Bellato has the edge in striking exchanges. Final prediction: Bellato by KO or decision. Just like the last fight, this matchup has no business being on a pay-per-view main card. That said, we're finally getting a heavyweight fight that's almost guaranteed to end in a brutal knockout, exactly what fans want from this division. My prediction will be as quick as the fight itself. I'm picking Talisson Teixeira to stop Justin Tafa in the first round. His height, though likely shorter than the UFC listed 6 feet 7 inches, will play a huge role. While Tafa has serious power, he's a natural brawler who tries to be more technical at this level. But once the bombs start flying, he reverts to his instincts. Teixeira's aggressive approach will bring that out of him early. I see Teixeira using his reach to keep Tafa at range while forcing wild exchanges. Tafa will swing for the fences, and I expect Teixeira to catch him coming in, likely with a fight-ending head kick or strike in round 1. That said, Tafa has a real shot if he can close the distance and capitalize on Teixeira's poor defense. Teixeira gets hit too much in pursuit of his own offense, and Tafa could make him pay for it. But ultimately, I think Teixeira's ability to control range will be the difference against a shorter, similarly aggressive opponent. Final prediction: Talisson Teixeira by TKO. I've been looking forward to this fight for a while, and I just hope Tatiana Suarez comes in at 100%, as injuries have plagued her career. Without them, I believe she'd already be a champion. Like Weili, she's well-rounded but lacks experience against top-level competition. That said, the key difference here is that Weili will finally face someone with superior wrestling and grappling. Suarez, an Olympic-level wrestler who missed out on the games due to injury, should have the edge in this department despite Weili's improvements. In striking, Weili has the advantage, but Suarez's style, fighting off the back foot and using her reach, could give her problems. We saw Weili struggle against Yan, even getting dropped when rushing in. So while Weili is the better striker, it may not be as one-sided as many expect. I'm picking the underdog Suarez to rise to the occasion and prove she's among the best, if not the best, strawweight in the world. I see her controlling distance, preventing Weili from overwhelming her with aggression, and mixing in her grappling to keep Weili on the defensive. Cardio is a potential concern for Suarez in her first 5-round fight, but her wrestling-based endurance should hold up better than Weili's, who isn't used to being out-grappled. We saw how fatigued Weili looked when Yan forced her to work in grappling exchanges, and Suarez, an even better grappler, can apply similar pressure while being the aggressor. Though I don't see Suarez getting a submission, I predict she wins a close decision in a hard-fought grappling battle. This is the second PPV of the year featuring a rematch, highlighting the UFC's current lack of fresh contenders at the top. Hopefully, we avoid issues like Arman vs Islam, where Arman's withdrawal, allegedly due to injury, was later revealed as a weight-cutting issue. This card isn't strong enough to lose this fight, so we just have to hope both men make weight and stay healthy. As for the fight, I see it as a foregone conclusion given their styles. DDP thrives on aggression, size, and power, aiming to break opponents down. Strickland, despite his bravado, is more of a counter-striker, relying heavily on jabs and teeps with little grappling. Since Strickland isn't adding new wrinkles to his game, how does he deal with DDP's pressure this time? Their first fight was close, with many believing Strickland did enough to retain. I also felt DDP didn't do enough to clearly dethrone him. Historically, in razor-thin decisions, champions often get the nod. Strickland's trash talk may have cost him more than his actual performance. That said, I don't see Strickland having real answers for DDP's aggression. Strickland appears focused on defensive wrestling, not offense, so I expect DDP to push the pace earlier. He seemed frustrated after dropping the first round last time. This time, I think he'll show less respect, engage more in inside exchanges, and land the more damaging shots. Strickland's offensive weapons are limited, and if drawn into a brawl, he'll likely start swinging wildly while absorbing the heavier shots. DDP might even forego grappling early, possibly using it in later rounds to manage his cardio. While Strickland may try to wear him down, I don't think he can slow DDP enough to turn the tide. Prediction: DDP by decision, this time, more convincingly.